Hey there. Ready to take the plunge with me?
Mm-hmm.
You've sent in some really interesting articles on cold plunging, and I have to admit, at first I was like, hard pass.
Yeah.
But then I started reading about how it could help with workout recovery,
Mm-hmm.
maybe even boost your mood.
Right.
And now I'm all in on figuring this out.
It's funny how we're naturally wired to avoid the cold, yet there's this growing buzz about its potential benefits.
Yeah.
We've got research from sources like the Mayo Clinic, along with some expert opinions, all pointing to some pretty compelling stuff.
Okay, so we've got articles and research excerpts, but what are we actually diving into today?
Well, we're going to take a deep dive into the potential benefits and drawbacks of cold plunging, especially for those of you looking to optimize your post-workout recovery.
Okay.
Maybe you've been thinking about trying it, or maybe you're just curious.
Mm-hmm.
Either way, by the end of this, you'll have a much clearer idea of what cold plunging is all about and if it's something you should consider.
I actually tried cold plunging the other day. I filled the tub with cold water,
Yeah.
threw in some ice,
Okay.
and let me tell you, it was a shock to the system.
Uh-huh.
I lasted about 30 seconds before I had to jump out.
That's a pretty common reaction.
Yeah.
But before we get into firsthand experiences, let's start with the basics. The Mayo Clinic article defines cold plunging as submerging yourself in water that's 50 degrees Fahrenheit or colder
Whoa.
for short periods of time.
Okay, so we're talking ice bath territory.
Yeah.
But I've also seen these fancy plunge tanks online,
Mm-hmm.
some costing upwards of $20,000.
Wow.
Is a bathtub with ice enough, or do I need to invest in one of those?
You definitely don't need a fancy plunge tank to reap the benefits.
Okay, good.
A cold bath at home, a dip in a cold lake, or even a quick cold shower can do the trick.
Okay.
The key is that water temperature. Got to make sure it's cold enough.
All right, so we've established that it needs to be cold.
Right.
But how long are we supposed to stay submerged? I'm picturing myself turning into a human popsicle after a few minutes.
The research is still a bit iffy on the exact optimal time,
Okay.
but it seems like the sweet spot is somewhere between a few minutes up to 10 minutes max.
Wow.
Most people start slow, like 30 seconds to a minute,
Okay.
and gradually increase the time as they get used to it.
Makes sense. You don't want to shock your system too much right off the bat. So let's get to why people are so hyped about this. The articles mentioned benefits like reduced inflammation and muscle soreness,
Right.
which is music to my ears, especially after those intense leg days at the gym.
Right. And there's actual science behind it.
Okay.
When you plunge into cold water, your blood vessels constrict.
Mm-hmm.
This helps to reduce swelling and inflammation in the muscles.
Oh.
Imagine it as a system reboot for your body after a tough workout.
So it's basically like an ice pack, but for your entire body.
It's similar to an ice pack, but it goes beyond just localized cooling.
Okay.
Cold plunging impacts your circulatory system, helping flush out metabolic byproducts and even affect your nervous system, which is where some of the mental benefits might come in.
Speaking of the nervous system, one article mentioned potential cognitive and mood benefits. It even hinted at cold exposure being a form of positive stress. This is where I get really curious. Are we saying that a quick dip in cold water could actually make us feel happier and think more clearly?
There's definitely research suggesting that. Think of it this way. Our bodies are designed to adapt to stress.
Okay.
When you expose yourself to controlled short bursts of stress, like a cold plunge, it can trigger a release of endorphins.
Ah, those feel-good chemicals.
Exactly.
I actually do feel more alert after a cold shower. Is that the same idea at play?
Exactly. And some experts even believe that this positive stress response could have long-term benefits, potentially even contributing to longevity by helping to reduce chronic inflammation.
Wow. Okay. So we've got potential benefits for workout recovery, mental clarity, maybe even a longer lifespan. It's starting to sound like cold plunging is some kind of a miracle cure. But before we all run out to fill our tubs with ice water, I'm guessing there's a flip side to all of this, right?
You're absolutely right.
Okay.
While there's promising research on the benefits, we can't ignore the potential drawbacks.
Yeah.
And let's be honest, the most obvious one is, well,
The freezing cold.
yeah.
It's not exactly the most inviting experience, and I can't imagine everyone's jumping for joy at the thought of a cold plunge.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Takes some getting used to, and the initial shock can be intense.
Right.
But many people find that they actually start to enjoy this sensation over time.
Oh, interesting.
It's almost like their body adapts to the cold and starts craving it.
Yeah.
But discomfort aside, there are some real risks we need to be aware of.
Okay, let's talk about those risks. What do we need to know?
Well, the sources we have highlight the risk of frostbite, especially if you're cold plunging outdoors in very cold temperatures.
Yeah.
And hypothermia is another concern.
Right.
If you stay in the cold water for too long,
Mm-hmm.
especially in natural bodies of water where the temperature can be much lower than in a controlled environment.
That makes sense. Safety first. So we need to be smart about where and how we do this. Anything else we should be cautious about?
This is where it gets a little more nuanced. The research suggests that cold plunging might actually hinder strength training gains.
Wait, really? So all those weightlifters hitting the ice bath after a heavy lifting session could be slowing down their progress? That seems counterintuitive.
It does, but some studies indicate that cold water immersion can interfere with the molecular signals that are activated after exercise,
Oh,
which are essential for muscle growth.
okay.
If your goal is to build muscle mass, cold plunging might not be the best recovery strategy.
Okay, so cold water can help with inflammation and soreness, but it might also mess with muscle growth. That's a pretty big trade-off. But some athletes swear by ice baths after lifting. Is there any evidence to support that?
It's true, many athletes still use cold plunging after strength training, and it might come down to individual preferences and how their bodies respond.
Right.
But from a purely scientific standpoint, the evidence suggests that cold plunging might not be optimal for maximizing muscle growth.
So what about other types of training? Is cold plunging beneficial for endurance athletes, like runners or cyclists?
Interestingly, the research suggests that cold plunging doesn't seem to have the same negative impact on endurance training.
Okay, so runners and cyclists, you might be in the clear.
Yeah.
But I'm still curious about the science behind this difference between strength training and endurance training. Can you break it down for us?
Sure. Strength training relies heavily on those molecular pathways we talked about
Mm-hmm.
to signal muscle protein synthesis, which is how your muscles grow bigger and stronger. Cold water immersion can dampen those signals, potentially slowing down the muscle building process.
Got it.
Endurance training, on the other hand, relies more on cardiovascular and metabolic adaptations,
Right.
which don't seem to be negatively affected by cold exposure in the same way.
Got it. So it's not a one-size-fits-all recovery method, and it's important to consider your individual training goals and how cold exposure might affect them. And speaking of individual considerations, one thing that stood out to me in the articles was the strong emphasis on consulting experts before jumping into the cold plunge, be pun intended.
Absolutely. The sources are very clear on this.
Okay.
Talking to a sports medicine specialist or a doctor is crucial, especially if you have any pre-existing health conditions or cardiovascular risk factors.
Yeah.
They can help you determine if cold plunging is safe for you and create a personalized plan that aligns with your overall health goals.
That's a great point. It's easy to get caught up in the excitement of a new trend, but we have to remember that everyone's body is different, and what works for one person might not be suitable for another.
Exactly. It's always better to err on the side of caution and prioritize your health and safety. So if you're intrigued by the potential benefits of cold plunging, I encourage you to do your research, talk to your doctor, and make an informed decision that's right for you.
You know, we started this deep dive talking about cold plunging as a way to recover from workouts, but this conversation has gone so much deeper than that. We're talking about the power of cold exposure for overall health and well-being, stress management, and even longevity. It's fascinating how something as simple as cold water can have such a profound impact on our bodies and minds.
It is remarkable.
Yeah.
And it speaks to the incredible adaptability and resilience of the human body. We're constantly evolving, responding to our environment, and finding ways to thrive.
And that brings us to the question we always ask at the end of these deep dives. So what does this all mean for you listening out there? Maybe you're thinking, all right, I'm intrigued, but I'm still not sure about jumping into a freezing cold tub. Are there baby steps you could take to explore the benefits of cold exposure without going full polar bear plunge?
That's a great question. Cold exposure doesn't have to be extreme to be beneficial. Even small changes, like ending your shower with a blast of cold water for 30 seconds, can have positive effects.
Oh, I've heard about that.
Yeah.
People swear by cold showers for boosting energy and circulation. Is that what we're talking about here?
Exactly. It's a more gradual way to introduce your body to the cold and potentially reap some of the benefits without the initial shock of a full plunge. You can think of it as dipping your toes into the icy waters, both literally and metaphorically.
I love that analogy.
Uh-huh.
It's about finding what works for you, starting small, and gradually increasing your exposure as you feel comfortable. And of course, always listening to your body and stopping if anything feels off.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this is where the concept of bio-individuality comes in.
Okay.
What works for one person might not work for another.
Right.
We all have different bodies, different health histories, and different goals.
So it's not about blindly following trends, but rather about finding what works best for you, which is why talking to those experts is so important, right?
Exactly. It's about personalized wellness, not a one-size-fits-all approach. And that's where consulting with experts like sports medicine specialists or doctors is so important. They can help you navigate this world of information, separate fact from fiction, and make informed decisions that align with your unique needs and goals.
This has been such a great conversation, and I think we've covered so much ground. We've talked about the science behind cold plunging, the potential benefits and risks, and how to approach it safely and responsibly.
And we've learned that cold exposure isn't just about athletic recovery.
Right.
It's a powerful tool that can impact our overall health and well-being.
So knowing what we've discussed today about the potential benefits and risks of cold exposure, how might you incorporate it into your routine in a safe and beneficial way?
That's a great question to think about. Maybe it's starting with a 30-second cold shower, finding a local cold plunge center, or even just taking a mindful walk in nature on a crisp winter day.
I love that. It's all about empowering ourselves to make informed choices and embrace the incredible potential of our bodies and minds. And on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive into the world of cold plunging. We hope you've enjoyed this icy adventure.
It really has been a journey exploring this topic.
It has.
And it makes you think about other ways we can tap into our body's natural abilities to heal and adapt.
It definitely makes you realize that we have more control over our health and well-being than we might think.
And sometimes the simplest things like cold water can have the most profound effects. Who knew?
Right. It's not always about fancy gadgets or expensive treatments. Sometimes it's about getting back to basics and embracing the power of nature.
Exactly. And speaking of embracing the power of knowledge, we'd love to hear from you.
Yes. What are your thoughts on cold plunging? Have you tried it? What was your experience?
Share your insights and questions with us on our social media channels. We're always eager to continue the conversation.
And maybe even inspire future deep dives into topics you're curious about. We've got so much more to explore in the realm of health and wellness.
Absolutely. There's always something new to learn and discover.
So until next time, keep diving deep, keep learning, and keep embracing the power of knowledge to transform your life.
And maybe, just maybe, give that cold shower a try. You never know. You might just surprise yourself.
It really has been a journey exploring this topic.
It has.
And it makes you think about other ways we can tap into our body's natural abilities to heal and adapt.
It definitely makes you realize that we have more control over our health and well-being than we might think.
And sometimes the simplest things, like cold water, can have the most profound effects.
Yeah.
Who knew?
Right. It's not always about fancy gadgets or expensive treatments.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's about getting back to basics and embracing the power of nature.
Exactly. And speaking of embracing the power of knowledge, we'd love to hear from you.
Yes. What are your thoughts on cold plunging?
Yeah.
Have you tried it? What was your experience?
Share your insights and questions with us on our social media channels.
Yeah.
We're always eager to continue the conversation.
And maybe even inspire future deep dives into topics you're curious about. We've got so much more to explore in the realm of health and wellness.
Absolutely. There's always something new to learn and discover.
So until next time, keep diving deep, keep learning, and keep embracing the power of knowledge to transform your life.
And maybe, just maybe, give that cold shower a try.
Uh-huh.
You never know, you might just surprise yourself.